Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Blood Red podcast. I'm your host, Keifer MacDonald, joined by Theo Squires and Joe Rimmer. Theo, how's things?
I've got a bit of a cold, so it's been a fun international break, as you can imagine, but I'm getting there. I'd say we're nearly at the end. No game this weekend, but yeah, the international football's nearly done, so that's always nice.
And Joe, you missed Friday's pod. We've had a bit of a change of positions.
Yeah.
It reminds me of that time at Stamford Bridge when Gerrard gave Henderson the armband, changing of the guard.
Really, yeah.
I'm in the host seat now, and you're...
Does that mean I have to drop back into defensive midfield and sort of...
I'll do your running.
That would be nice.
You see the glamorous part.
Yeah. I was all right until Theo said that about his cold. I wouldn't have sat so close to him.
He's got one as well, if it makes you feel better.
Just sat over there.
It's all doom and gloom.
Yeah. Otherwise, I'm all right. Thank you.
Plenty to get into in today's episode, but before we do, a huge thank you to our sponsors, NordVPN. To get the best discount off your NordVPN plan, go to nordvpn.com/bloodred.com. Our link will also give you 4 extra months on a 2-year plan, and there's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee, and the link can be found in the podcast description box. Joe, plenty to talk about today. It's normally quite a quiet international break with Liverpool, but the news today, or a report, should I say, that Trent Alexander-Arnold has agreed on a move to Real Madrid. It's not really a surprise, is it? But, it's kind of taken social media by storm, the last couple of hours. First of all, just your initial thoughts on those kind of reports.
Yeah, it's not confirmed yet by any means, but the mood music, if you like, is playing, and I think we're all wise enough to know that we all suspected Trent would be going to Madrid, and I think this is just another confirmation of that, really. How do I feel? I have sort of mixed feelings. On one hand, we kind of, like you said, we knew it was going to happen, but on the other hand, I'm pretty gutted because I think once Trent does leave, I think people will realise how good he is. I think sometimes people are quick to dismiss him, take him for granted a little bit, but he's redefined what a right back is, not just for Liverpool, but in football in general. I think he's, his technical ability is unrivaled in that position, and there's all this tiresome debate, isn't there, around his defensive skills? But you don't win the trophies he's won: Champions League, Club World Cup, an FA Cup, 2 League Cups, and soon to be, hopefully, two Premier Leagues. You don't win those trophies if you're a bad defender. You don't play the amount of games he's played for Liverpool at the highest level if you're a bad defender. You don't contribute what he's contributed to this team if you're a bad defender. But what he is a really, really good attacker. And, I was just looking at his stats before we came in. He's had 86 assists for Liverpool. It's just incredible. It's an incredible number. And, you think back to the season Liverpool won the Premier League under Klopp. Him and Robertson were just like that was the sort of main weapon for Liverpool, wasn't it? Getting the ball to them into wide areas, and they were able to put crosses in and feed the front line, and they were just kind of unstoppable. So I think people who are sort of dismissive of Trent and who think that he's not that good and he's easily replaced, I think need to borrow a phrase from a colleague of ours, give their heads a wobble a little bit. I think he's been an exceptional player. I think he suits Real Madrid, and I think he'll be an exceptional player there. I think you only have to look back at the Paris Saint-Germain game the other day to see, when he went off, they lost quite a bit, and then the Newcastle game as well. And I think you could see the marked difference. So. It's not been great the way it's all come about, but it never is when players leave on a free transfer. But I think Liverpool are as much to blame as Trent is on that front. I just hope that he can get back fit from this injury and at least play a game before the end of the season and get his winners' medal and whatnot. But it's a shame the way it looks to be ending, but he has been an incredible player.
Theo, it's not really much of a surprise, is it? If you compare it to the likes of Virgil van Dijk and Mohamed Salah, Trent's kind of silence on his contract situation has been pretty deafening, hasn't it? By kind of, he said he doesn't want to play it out in public, but, he's had so many opportunities to kind of outline that he wants to say to Liverpool, like Van Dijk, like Salah have done, but he just hasn't taken that opportunity for whatever reason. It makes all of this that's coming out this morning no real surprise, does it?
Yeah, we've all suspected that this was the way it's going to go for a while because he hasn't said anything. It'd be very easy to dismiss these reports straight away if he would say, yeah, I want to stay. At some point in proceedings, the messaging from him has changed. Like, you think it was only a year ago, 2 years ago, it was like, I want to be Liverpool captain. I want to play here for the rest of my career. And at some point, that's changed when there's interviews where I want to win the Ballon d'Or and stuff like that. It's become more individual. It's easy to look at that in hindsight, but there has just been that change of tone. And because we haven't heard anything from him, we don't really understand the reasoning behind it. Like, yeah, Real Madrid, great club, going to get a very lucrative deal, probably better place to win Champions Leagues with them. But it's still Liverpool, your boyhood club. You want to go and follow in Steven Gerrard's footsteps. So it'll be interesting to, when he does speak, if he does go Real Madrid, to see what was the motivation there. Because it's not going to just be Jude Bellingham plays there, is it? There's going to be more there. And it is a very appealing place to go and play football, Real Madrid. It is the big club. But sometimes boyhood side, it means more. It's easy for me to say that off the back of the Legends game where I've just seen Steven Gerrard playing in a Liverpool shirt once again, kissing the badge. It's like all these players genuinely just delighted to play for Liverpool again. Like we saw Peter Crouch's celebrations. But Trent, he's won everything with Liverpool, which these players haven't, let's be honest. You can understand why he might fancy a new move. But yeah, he just needs to come out and say it now. Maybe that's why we're getting the reports, because if he has badly injured his ankle, might only see him play for Liverpool another couple of times. And the league title should be done by the time he's back in that sense. Maybe it's a good time for them to announce those intentions. But like Joe said, it's a shame how it is coming out like this. At least there should be a nice little Anfield farewell for him. But it'll be a very mixed reaction from supporters, I'd imagine. Like looking at social media, you can already see some of the backlash that's come in, people bringing out those old interviews where he said he wants to play for the club for the rest of his life. Something's changed there.
Absolutely. I mean, Joe, is it an easy excuse for Trent to kind of go now? I mean, Liverpool are kind of caught in two areas at the minute. You know, the end of... You think 18 months ago when these reports of Madrid first being interested in him first came around, it was around the time that Klopp said that he was going. So, you know, Liverpool kind of lost that time. Then all of a sudden, a new manager's in. Trent probably wants to do the first 6 months, see what Slot's like as a coach, as a person as well. Then all of a sudden it's into January. Madrid put that offer in on New Year's Eve. Do you just think all the time has just made it really easy to kind of sneak out the back door almost?
Yeah, I think so. And I think this is where I think the club have to take the blame, or a lot of the blame, because... You know, he's in his prime. I think the last contract, I was listening to something the other week, the last contract they gave him was 4 years. Is that right, I think?
Yeah.
I mean, 4 years just for a player who is so important in the team just doesn't feel right. You know,
well, we said at the time, because Robertson got the extra year.
Even Henderson got 4 years at the time, and he was 31.
Well, because Trent, now you'd imagine he would have been your highest earner.
Yeah.
Like now you give him that contract to make him the captain and take it on, but obviously that's not so.
Well, he probably saw a change in a role one way or another.
Yeah.
He was going to be the biggest contract of his career at 26, 27, wouldn't it have been?
And like you say, there's been that period of flux, hasn't there, at Liverpool? The sporting director's changing hasn't helped things. And then obviously the manager changing. But I think whilst the sporting directors were changing, surely there should have been some sort of messaging or thought within the top of the club. And maybe there has been. You know, we don't know how long they've been in negotiations. Perhaps this goes back a while. But, you know, that this is a priority and is something that they should have sorted. I mean, look, I think of the three of them, most people would have sat there and said, well, Salah and Van Dijk are slightly more important than Trent, but as an asset for Liverpool, I actually think he's probably the most important in terms of they could have got a big fee for him, whereas the other two probably...
And also commercially as well, to lose a lad who's arguably the best in his position in the world, who's growing up on the doorstep of Anfield.
That's how the supporter thinking's changed, hasn't it? Like, say, 2 years ago, Trent was the one you had to keep. He was the future of your club. He was the youngest one who was going to get better and better. The other two, you didn't know how long it would be until they fell off a cliff. And then when all the Real Madrid rumours come out, it's, well, we can see how important Van Dijk is. We can see how important Salah still is. Trent, he's still up and down, inconsistent. He's getting that backlash. It just changed that narrative quite quickly.
Yeah, so I think I can understand how it's come about, you know, and while Liverpool's at this period of flux, they've probably had people from Real Madrid just working on him, haven't they? You know, like Bellingham going there was probably a major turning point in this saga, if you like, because obviously they're close. Bellingham's chosen Real Madrid and has probably been talking to him about the lifestyle there. I also think Real Madrid are really able to sell this glamorous, you know, if you want to go and win the Ballon d'Or, then, you know, you're more likely to win it there, aren't you? It seems to be this sort of glamour prize. I don't place much value in it, but it's very political, you know, and I think those two clubs, Real Madrid and Barcelona, have got that glamour about it. That's where the players who win it tend to pick it up. So I can see all that coming together, and I can see Real Madrid saying you can take your football career and your name to new heights at Real Madrid, whereas at Liverpool you might not ever be able to do that. And I get all that. I don't like this idea that if you leave a club, you don't love it. You know, it's one thing from living in this city, been brought up here, and I think there's an idea that if you leave the city of Liverpool, that somehow you don't love it as much as others who say they're going to stay for the rest of their lives. You know, there are other lives out there, and going and living in Madrid, you know, just on a basic level of, you can go and live in a nice climate and have a nice lifestyle and give his family a nice lifestyle. I think it's pretty cool. So I don't really blame him for wanting to go and do those things. What I don't like is that, you know, I think he has kept this silence. He said things about the Ballon d'Or, but there's been little hints, little pictures. I think I said it on a podcast a while back, you know, like these sort of cryptic pictures that he's dropped onto social media. I don't like that nowadays. I don't like the way players play the game a bit. And I hope that if this deal has been agreed and if things are going through now and he's made his mind up, then he should come out publicly, do a bit of an open letter or a statement and just explain his reasoning a little bit and try to square that with fans. I don't think everyone will get on board with it, but I think that Trent does deserve something when he leaves, and he does deserve a good send-off, and I hope that most people can pull together and give him that. So yeah, it's just a difficult one. I think the lack of fee makes it harder to take, but do you think the fans would act any differently if he'd have left for 100 million?
Well,
I don't think they would.
This is my next question. Is it a disappointment that Trent's leaving on a free transfer, or is it a disappointment that Trent Alexander-Arnold, the footballer, is leaving Liverpool? Because, I mean, you know, having Real Madrid poach one of your best players for free, you know, is bitter, isn't it? You know, especially a team that have beaten Liverpool in 2 Champions League finals during Trent's time in the first team. What's your kind of take on that, Theo?
Well, how Liverpool have had these contracts expiring in recent years, it seems to have taken the sting out of it when players do go for free. So now it's more of a bonus when you get that big transfer fee for him. Because apart from Sadio Mane, all of them have just seen out the contracts. Like Jurgen Klopp changed the thinking behind it, going, well, think how much it would cost to replace them. Think how much they'd offer you in that final year for the contracts. And if they win the Premier League, which looks like they should do, Trent has still played a big part in that. So it works both ways, doesn't it? Like, it does sting that he'll be going on a free transfer, but not the same way that Steven McManaman did 20 odd years ago, or Michael Owen went for 8 million when he's in that last year. It's not that same disloyalty there. It's just how it's gone. Like, if Liverpool wanted to keep him and not lose him for free, they should have had the contract tied down 2-3 years ago. And then he's still at that age where Real Madrid can come and offer it. But football landscape's changed, doesn't it? These players now do go for the free transfers and see out the deals. They get the signing on fees when there isn't the money there in some clubs to offer the big transfer fees. Like we've seen Barcelona and Real Madrid getting stunned by the pandemic, trying to get into the European Super League, get that off so they have more finances. They can't compete with the Premier League. The big players they sign are your like Lewandowski's, your Mbappe's on free transfers. That's the way they get around it.
That seems to be the new model, doesn't it? You know, you kind of give the players a hefty fee, probably more than they'd acquire in wages, but it's obviously significantly lower transfer fee than PSG would have asked for Mbappe, Liverpool would have asked for Trent Alexander-Arnold, Bayern Munich for Lewandowski and so on. It does kind of seem like that, as Theo says, that kind of new way of working in especially with finances more tight.
Yeah, and I'm sure Real Madrid now, because this is their model, will be working on these deals 2 years out. You know, they'll be looking at a player now probably whose contract runs out in a couple of years.
He's another example, isn't he?
And they'll begin working on that and putting the feelers out and saying, if you see out your contract, we'll come for you. I suppose the gamble, you know, for players like Mbappe, they'll back themselves. For others, you know, the gamble is whether they stay at that level for the next couple of years. But yeah, I don't think people would be any different if Trent was leaving for 100 million. I think they'd still criticise him. They'd still say he was a traitor and stuff like that. People just don't like the idea of players leaving the clubs that they love, and that's normal. But I think we should all take a step back and just recognise he's been an amazing player. And if he does leave, then you know it hurts. But wish him well, and I'm sure he'd be back playing in one of those Legends games one day because he is a bona fide Liverpool legend.
Yeah, I just want to touch on something Joe said before we talked on contracts and free agents and whatnot. Can you separate Trent the player and Trent the footballer in terms of him wanting to try something different? Essentially he's trying a new job, isn't he, in Spain, and Madrid. It's a lovely lifestyle I'm sure he'll be living. He becomes more of a celebrity, more of a prominent figure around the world. We know he's been to those kind of fashion week shows in Milan and Paris and what. Clearly, he's got other ventures outside of football. For him, can you see why that makes sense, that step to go to Madrid and kind of play for probably the biggest club in the world?
Yeah, I can. Part of the backlash is because he's a Scouser, he's that boyhood fan. So that's why there is more of a sting there, because supporters look at it and go, well, I wouldn't want to do that. Why does he want to do that? For him, I think of the backlash he gets from pundits, from supporters, and how every single move he does on the pitch is scrutinised. Think back to the Manchester United performance, and he wants to prove himself, and maybe he sees it as, I've won everything at Liverpool and they're still saying this about me. Like, think of the backlash he got during the Euros when they tried him in midfield, threw it out the window after a couple of games, and he was to blame there. It's like, well, if they're never going to trust me now, they're never going to believe in me now. Go to the biggest club in the world. If you go to Real Madrid, I don't think he's going to ever win a Ballon d'Or at Real Madrid, because it'll go to an attacking player. It'll go to a Jude Bellingham, Mbappe, Vinny Jr. But he can still win 3 Champions Leagues, 4 Champions Leagues. It's a lot easier for them to get those honours, and then he can come back and say, well, look, the best club in the world fancy me. I've played a big part here. And it is different to when McManaman went there, whereas McManaman went to Real Madrid and he was almost forgotten in English football. Like, he won, was it 2 Champions Leagues? And he was still barely got in the England team, things like this. Now there's a lot more recognition there. And if you take away the identity of boyhood Liverpool fan, if it's just one of your assets who has won absolutely everything and he's not going to really achieve much more, it's fine for him to go to that level, because it is winning more silverware. You are going to win more Champions Leagues at Real Madrid. They're just that sort of club. They'd have to fall off an absolute cliff for someone else to emerge as this superpower in European football. And the way they're bringing players in, that's not going to happen. It's not an ageing Real Madrid side. It's got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, the best players in world football who are still early 20s, mid-20s. This side is going to dominate European football for years to come. So it's almost a compliment that they want Trent Alexander-Arnold. But Liverpool should look at that and go, why can't we keep him? Like, Liverpool, that is what they want to be. It's fallen short to Real Madrid in Champions League finals. It's like, well, this is something they can learn from next time. How do they take that next step to make sure they're not losing players to Real Madrid, to make sure they're not losing Champions League finals to Real Madrid? It's just part of that overall play going forward.
And I suppose Liverpool will look at it, I mean, maybe, they'll feel hard done by, in the sense of they had that period of transition we said between the Klopp and the Slot era. But in terms of this year, in terms of debut seasons goes under Slot, I mean, they couldn't have really done much more, really, in terms of how good they've been in the Premier League. And maybe off the field, people have, aimed criticism at Richard Hughes and whatnot. But in terms of kind of Slot's audition to kind of, this is the place Trent wants to play his peak years, he couldn't have done an awful lot more, could he, Joe?
I mean, in terms of Richard Hughes, I mean, he couldn't have been given a bigger hospital pass, could he? In trying to sort out those contracts. So I don't think you can lay the blame at his door.
No, but fans will naturally.
No, fans will.
Yeah.
But I think that is harsh. I think it's that period of flux a couple of years back that has caused this knock-on effect with just not just Trent's contract but the others. I think Liverpool need to learn from it though, and it looks like they are doing by trying to get Konate tied down and others as well. But Liverpool can't allow themselves to be put in this position over the course of the next 2-3 years. I don't think they need a saga like this every year. No. So they need to get the house in order around contracts. But my biggest thing for Liverpool now is it's going to cost them in the summer. If Trent does go, if the other two go, then they're going to need to find replacements for 3 of the best players in world football, and on top of that, fix the weaknesses that they have in the squad in the first place. They still need a central defender, they still need a central midfielder, they still need a left back, they still need a centre forward. So even if the 3 of them leave, I can't see Liverpool signing 7 players in one summer. It's just not their style. But then they're going to be behind. So I think this has had a real effect on them, and we could really see that in the summer. So it's great that they're in a great position now, but I think that we're going to see a real period of change at Liverpool following the Premier League.
It's just odd, isn't it? Because a side that wins the Premier League should push on. It shouldn't be the end of a story where you're looking at all these players that could go. Because if it's a Núñez, a Diaz, Trent, these are still players that, if they're at the best, they're in the starting 11. So it just seems strange that that's the end of the chapter. But then there's the excitement of, Arne Slot and Richard Hughes can bring their own players in. But you wonder, are you taking a couple of steps back there for it all to gel? Trent, I don't like the silence from it, because we've heard from Salah, we know his intentions. We've heard from Van Dijk. Whereas it's not just the fact that Trent hasn't wanted to be in the mix zone, say anything, or hasn't done the press conferences before Champions League games. It's whenever he has done media duties, the strict instruction is you don't ask him about the future. Like we've seen Jamie Carragher joke about it when he's on stage at charity events. We know when Sky or TNT have had him, they're not allowed to ask about it. So it's like, well, you're covering up something here, and whilst there's a respect, maybe he doesn't want it played out in public, it'd still be nice to know the understanding there. He's going to have to come out and say something, isn't he? If he does go to explain it, you can't just go out the back door and expect people to accept all these reasonings. You can't just go and do your press conference in Spain and then that's all you say on the matter.
You've just said something that I think is quite interesting about the Premier League leaders shouldn't be the team that then goes through this period of change. But I think that's like the double-edged sword, isn't it, of playing for Liverpool and for a successful Liverpool, is that like, and Trent is probably the perfect example of that, is like, no matter what he achieves, there's this debate around him. Every time he plays a game, Roy Keane or Gary Neville are having this big debate about his defending. And I think like, but if he's that bad a defender, how can he be an automatic pick for Liverpool every week? How can he have played in all these cup finals and won all these honours? And it's just simply that Liverpool are so exposed in terms of they're on telly almost every week. They're talked about in every newspaper column and every TV show, that it's a good topic of debate. But Trent, this is again why I think when he leaves, people will realise he's probably the best right back in the world. And it's the same on the other side. I think Robertson, we've all seen this season, he's a touch slower than he used to be. But I would still argue that Robertson is still probably in the best 10% of left backs, certainly in England, probably in the world, because he plays every week for Liverpool and he's still that much better than others. So that's why it's so hard. And when Trent leaves, it's going to be so hard to find a replacement. It's going to be so hard. Conor Bradley's obviously a good player and I hope that he develops, but the injury problems sort of is a little bit of an alarm bell. And I still think that Liverpool will have to get used to on a very different right back to the one that they've had. I mean, when I was growing up, I thought Steve Finnan was a really good right back, and that's not a knock on Steve Finnan. I think he was, and our blower. But Trent is just miles better.
And there's no one in the market you could look at and say, well, there's a similar skill set. If it was Bradley who was going, he's very traditional, and he's up and down, gets the ball in the box, overlaps. Trent, he's like a central midfielder.
Well, the reports over the weekend were Frimpong, good player, but doesn't get your pulse racing. But then that's how football's changed. Because right backs never used to get your pulse racing.
Well, he was someone who I'd listed down as a potential replacement. There's been a lot of talk that he could be someone who comes in. 230 appearances in his senior career so far with Celtic and Leverkusen. So that's kind of a nice number that I think Liverpool like. At that age, at 24 as well, that's fairly impressive. He's
counts as homegrown, doesn't he? Because he came through at City.
Yeah, and obviously won the...
Loves a homegrown. Theo's always
the
got...
mind's always working,
He's always got
it?
that homegrown quota in.
But yeah, obviously won the Bundesliga last season. His numbers in terms of assists, if you were to kind of take Trent out of the equation, are fairly high. I think Trent's a bit of an anomaly in terms of his kind of end product, isn't he, for a right back?
We say this, Trent's numbers have been down the last couple of years, so that's something else to
consider. I suppose
consider.
if you just look at his Liverpool career, I mean, as Joe said, I think there's 87 assists and 22 goals, which is ludicrous, isn't it, for a right back?
Even if his numbers are down, I mean, again, this is off the cuff, so I don't know whether, but I bet you if you compared them to most of the people's numbers, they would still be significantly higher.
It just shows how they rewrote fullbacks, and then they've had to tweak it.
Was
again.
Was it 19-20 or 18-19 when he got the most assists in a season?
He was getting like 15, 16 in a season.
And that was just a given, wasn't it? It was,
Yeah, I think for Liverpool, the solution will probably be tactical, won't it? It will have to be a change in how they play.
Well, look at it like this. Robertson's only got one assist all season, and that was in the Champions League.
I think that's what Slot likes, though. I think the success is built on the defensive foundations, isn't it? We've seen that with Trent. He's kind of reined him in a bit this season. He's obviously closer to, Van Dijk or whoever's playing on that side. And
people forget for like 6 months, we were talking about Trent being defensively as good as I certainly hadn't seen him in years. So he, like you say, he had been reined in a bit, but he seemed more solid. And obviously that United game kind of sticks in the memory of being such a bad performance. But you could tell that day it was just, it just was one of those days for him.
And also everything that came out around that time. That was the first game since Madrid. Put the first or second game. It was very easy to kind of put one together and get five, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Joe, just to kind of finish off on the kind of the current Trent chat. How do you think he should have dealt with it in hindsight then, if he is to leave Liverpool, if this is the end of his Liverpool career? How do you think he'll look back at the final 12 months and how he's handled this kind of impasse?
I don't think it's been handled that bad, because what could he have done? He can't give you a running commentary on like, he can't come out every month and say, just to let you know that nothing's agreed yet, but I'm thinking between... He can't...
He could have not hidden from it, though.
If he was going to leave, though, he can't come out in September and say, I might leave next summer, I'm having to think about it. People would not accept that.
No.
People want him to be transparent, but they don't want him to tell them the things that they don't want to know. They don't want him to say he's leaving. So if this was obviously always in his mind that he was considering an offer, But I don't like there has been throughout the course of the season the odd cryptic thing, you know, the odd picture,
celebration at West Ham.
yeah, you know, like all these different odd things, and you think don't do that, you know, just keep saying what you've said a few times, which is, look, I'll talk about it when it's done, but it's not fair to talk about it as it's ongoing. But I don't really know what else he could have done hugely differently.
I mean,
what would you have had him done?
He'll probably look at it from his point of view and say, I've been the model professional. I've gone out there every week and I've
trained.
Played, trained, contributed to Liverpool winning the Premier League. They've, what they've done this season, a really successful first season. I haven't let my future distract me, even though, I've known from last summer that this is my final year. So I suppose it's whichever way you flip it, really, isn't it?
What he should have done is kind of like what Isak's doing now. Isak's not out of contract, but he's been asked about his future a lot, hasn't he, the last few weeks? And it's like, well, I'm focused on winning the League Cup. I'm focused on getting in the Champions League.
But he's not out of contract.
I know, that's what I mean. But like with Trent, he could have been, look, we'll sort out my future at the end of the season. I'll talk then. Now I'm focused on winning the Premier League. If he still just said that a couple of times a season, it's not the fact that he's taken it off the table in terms of, you can speak to Trent, but he's not going to speak about his future. Do not ask him about the contract. He has made a point to hide away from it, whether that's come from him or it's come from the agent. Whereas even if he just threw a bone like Van Dijk does when he stops in the mix zone every week, or Salah did coming out, I'm not saying he has to come out and say, I want to stay at Liverpool, but he can still say, right, I'm focused on this season. We've got a Premier League to win. This is the most important thing to me. Future will get resolved when it gets resolved. It's just hiding away from it. That's what I don't like about it.
I see what you mean. I just think it's quite tough, isn't it? Because like the get out for Van Dijk and Salah, as they both made quite clear, they want to stay. So however many ways they ask that question, they just say, I'm focused on winning the Premier League, but I love this club and want to stay. So I think with Trent, you would find that they'd say, the question would change from where are you at with your contract to do you want to stay? And then he wouldn't answer it. And then suddenly people would say he was asked if he wants to stay and he didn't answer the question. I just think it's really tough. He obviously has wanted to leave. I think that was clear from the outset.
He was definitely gambling on they're going to be in a transitional year. They're going to finish like fifth, not qualify for the Champions League. I can just go.
Yeah, exactly. And that hasn't happened. And I do wonder, maybe throughout the course of the year, he's thought, God, this manager's good and this team is good.
I think for ages he hadn't made his mind up and he was just treading water. He was trying to please both parties. And
I just think if it had gone the other way and he'd done what you'd say, people would still be sitting here. We'd still be sitting on this podcast debating it. People would still be criticising him. They'd be reading into every answer. He's tried to keep quiet. I just don't like the cryptic stuff. And I don't really love the whole, I want to win the Ballon d'Or. I just think it's a bit like,
it's never
get
been
get over yourself. It's just not
it doesn't go in line with the morals of.
You'll win the Ballon d'Or if you're really good and you win the Premier League, the Champions League.
But that's it.
That like Salah doesn't really talk. Correct me if I'm wrong. He doesn't really talk about winning individual awards
this year. But it's like, well, I'd rather win the Premier and the Champions League, and then we'll talk about it later.
And you get it if you're a great part of that. So
like Van Dijk should have won it in 2019. But when was it ever part of the conversation that season, apart from us bigging him up?
Yeah. Let other people say you should win the Ballon d'Or. So, but maybe that was just Trent trying to think of a decent, because he was asked, wasn't he, what do you see in your future? And it was a creative way of getting around the contract question. So it was like, well, what do I say? I can't say I want to win 5 more Premier Leagues. So it had to be something slightly different. But it's a really difficult one. I just don't think there's any one way a player can answer.
It's a lot easier to answer when he comes on the record, when he explains why what is happening happens. You just need to hear from him, because it isn't really going to be, I just want to win a Ballon d'Or and I've got a better chance of doing that at Real Madrid. That's not going to fly.
Everything that comes with Madrid, isn't it? The glamour the supposed glamour of living in Madrid and playing for Real Madrid.
Because if he comes out and says, like, you know what, I'm just fed up of people in England writing me off saying I can't defend, I want to go and prove it at a bigger stage because what I've achieved at Liverpool clearly isn't enough for them.
I know this whole podcast is not Trent, but do you think that the debate around him not being able to defend, it's boring, but do you think that really comes into it? I think
he'd be scrutinised more in Spain than he would in England, I think.
I think he wants Real Madrid to take him to the next level in terms of the type of way he's talked about in terms of like, Roberto Carlos. Everyone of a certain era and age will talk about Roberto Carlos as being like one of the best fullbacks.
Yeah.
And really, how much Roberto Carlos will you have watched? Probably just watch highlights of him hitting
all we've seen is the free
kicks. Yeah, and he had that. So
he only played 2 games in his career.
Yeah, I can understand from Trent's point of view, take him up, but I don't necessarily think like the debate is just. it's just daft, isn't it? Do you really think he cares about TalkSport having one of their random Trent debates or Keane
I
going
just
on
think he
a rant?
got a bit spikier towards the backlash.
Yeah, maybe,
around the
yeah,
last
maybe
last two international tournaments when he wasn't getting a look in for England when he should have been, because he was getting a lot of stick, wasn't he, before the World Cup?
Yeah.
And then at the Euros when he was thrown under the bus with the whole midfield experiment. I think that's tipped him over the edge.
That was dreadful, wasn't it? And I think there hasn't been a more misunderstood player nationally. In Liverpool, it was just like, he's the best right back. I mean, Klopp used to have a great answer to that question. Why would you move him when he's so good where he is? I think Real Madrid will lean into that. But that experiment in the summer, because they played him as a defensive midfielder and then had him tapping the ball 5 yards when we know that Trent's passing range is about the medium to longer passes.
And all his teammates are the ones coming short into the space rather than making those runs for him to pick out.
And it just wasn't a good use of him. So, I mean, the fact he hasn't played that much international football, I don't really think that will change at Madrid. But maybe it will just change the
if he goes and wins 2 Ballon d'Ors, as you say, 2 La Ligas, Cop del Rey, whatever the trophies they have over there are, all of a sudden people look at his career differently. I think he's a 3-time Champions League winner. He's a 3-time league winner, whatever. It's different. Isn't
David Beckham the comparison? He's still a Manchester United legend. Granted, not of an end of a contract. He fell out with Ferguson, but there wasn't really any fans turning on him when he left United, were there? And I think he only won one La Liga title, but it took him to that next level, and he was the poster boy in all the advertisements, and that's seemingly what Trent's becoming, isn't he? When you see him on the adverts teaming up with Adidas and everything, he is, along with Jude Bellingham, the big poster boys now for English football.
I think it'll be exactly that. It's about that glamour next step in your career.
I mean, Theo, he's part of is it one of the F1 teams he's invested in?
Alpine, yeah, he's part of Alpine.
So he's obviously got his fingers in different pies off the field. In terms of replacements, you have mentioned Frimpong. Is there question marks about Bradley then, because it feels like he hasn't had a sustained run in the team since breaking through. He's kind of been disrupted. So if you're Liverpool, what's the approach you take? Do you go and buy an out-and-out first choice, or do you buy someone who's going to compete with Bradley and maybe one of them jostles ahead to get that position? I mean, how do you play that, Theo?
I want to see Bradley given a go, but then it's, can his body hack it? Because he has had a couple of muscle injuries. Remember, not even an injury, but when he came on against Forest, he was kind of at fault for the winner. Maybe he started that one. I can't remember if he started or he came on.
When Hudson-Odoi got
yeah. So it's like we still need to see a longer run from him. Like when he had the run in the first team last year and he was getting so many assists, that was still a different Liverpool way of playing. So it'll be interesting to see how Arne Slot really wants his right back to play. Because with Trent Alexander-Arnold, he couldn't be, this is what I want from my right back, you change to me. He had to make it work. So it'll be interesting to see what they want to do. I want to see Bradley given a go, and there doesn't seem to be a standout world-class right back you can bring in to replace Trent. Maybe the answer is to get one of those hybrids who can play centre-back but can also play there. But then Frimpong, they like a release clause, and his is 40 million? Then you can say with him, well, he plays wing-back at Leverkusen. What was he actually done at right-back? So there's all these different caveats to consider. It'll be interesting to see what they do, but then they've got so much to consider regardless of what happens with Van Dijk and Salah, because you could see 3 of the forwards going, 4 of the forwards going. You need another holding midfielder. You need another centre-back, even if Van Dijk stays. You need another left-back. There's a lot to consider here in the summer.
I mean, Joe, he's only played, he's played 50 games for Liverpool with only 2,700 minutes, which doesn't feel like an awful lot. When you think of Bradley, you haven't got like an amazing highlight reel in your head of, we know what he's capable of when he's fit and firing and, those moments, and he's very tenacious, isn't he? But you can't kind of think of like 7 or 8, 9 games where he's like really stood out and had that like prolonged spell in the first team.
I would, like Theo, I would do the same thing. I think Trent leaves, then you try and buy someone that can compete with Bradley, but not necessarily take his place. And I think there could be a really good fullback there. Again, let's go back to what I said at the start of the show. Don't think he will ever reach the heights that Trent has, but I don't necessarily think that many fullbacks ever will. But I think there's a really good player there, and my reservation is, can he stay fit for an entire season? I don't know. I don't know enough. I think he did for Bolton, didn't he, when he was on loan there? So he might have just been unlucky the last couple of years, but I'd love to see him over the course of a season and whether and what his performances are like, because he's been fairly consistent, hasn't he? I mean, the odd time he's been caught out, but that's normal. So, I'd say 90% of the times I've seen Conor Bradley, I've been pretty impressed by him. So I'd like to see him over the course of a season, and I wouldn't like to see Liverpool, unless they're absolutely 100% sure that what they're doing is the right thing. I wouldn't like to see Liverpool splurge loads of money on a right back.
They've got bigger fish to fry. They need to spend it on elsewhere. Is it just the 2 hamstring injuries this year? Like you got one of Real Madrid, one at Aston Villa when he came off the bench. Was it a back injury last year in pre-season?
Yeah.
Like, that one's unfortunate. Lots of Liverpool youngsters have that growing pains.
I was about to say that
related one.
difference from kind of academy football to the relentlessness of first-team football.
But like the hamstrings is a concern when they stack up. Like you could say Real Madrid, he's put in a hell of a performance up against like Mbappe. That can take its toll. Aston Villa, he's coming cold. But it's still something they need to manage a bit better.
I think that's a big part of it, though, isn't it? Coming in and out of the team, you know, can't help his match fitness, can it? So maybe if you're starting from scratch, start next season, you're playing every week. Maybe his fitness will improve there. Because I think he stayed fit. You can check. I could be wrong, but I think when he was on loan, he stayed fit pretty much the entire season.
He played the majority of the season. It's whether he got a second injury last year or not.
Yeah, he played 53 games for Bolton, which in one season is double the amount of minutes he played for Liverpool. 7 goals, 6 assists. But you got to think as well, he's also a fully fledged international at the age of 21. So, you know, he's not exactly, even if he's not playing at Liverpool, he's always kind of playing on the international games, isn't he? He's obviously a big player for Northern Ireland. Theo, speaking of internationals, any concerns around Ryan Gravenberch pulling out of the Netherlands squad last week? Supposedly injured in the Carabao Cup final against Newcastle, but is that just the old go there report, you know, say, look, I've got a big 7 or 8 weeks coming up, let me go back to Liverpool?
I hope it is a case of wink, wink, nudge, nudge, I'm injured. It doesn't seem to be too serious, but we'll wait and see. We're not going to hear from Arne Slot for a week now, will we? We'll hear from him pretty much press conference on Tuesday, I'd imagine. But it doesn't seem to be too serious. Like there's Alisson as well and Konate, but Konate stayed with France. He was an unused sub on the bench. Alisson's already said, yeah, I'll be fine. And he's got, a week and a half to recover from a concussion. So it should just be a case of managing them carefully. Like Gravenberch probably has had a couple of knocks this season, and that might be part of the reason why he's dropped off a little bit in the last month or two. Wasn't anything that stood out for him being injured in the League Cup final.
Went off on about 70, didn't he? 75, I think. But that just felt normal at the time.
Yeah, just felt like we were assuming because throwing everything forward for goals. Hopefully it's not too much of anything. And if it is, you've got Ouattara under there for the derby. We know he'll have to kick a few Everton players there. He should have come on at Goodison, as we said on this podcast a few times. But Gravenberch, it could be a blessing in disguise because he's been afforded a rest anyway. He needed to be taken out of the firing line just so he could be at his absolute best for the run-in.
I was just about to say, Joe, it's a pretty well-timed rest, if so, isn't it? Because he's played 41 games this season. So he's played, 41 games this season, 41 starts, which is just absolutely immense considering where he was this time last year, you know, going from one extreme to the other almost. Yeah,
that again, that's why I think they will need to look at that position this summer, because I think they've got plenty of good options, haven't they? But I would like to see someone ease the pressure a bit on Gravenberch. I don't necessarily think they have to go at it like they did last summer with like a Zubimendi because you don't want to see Gravenberch replaced. But yeah, hopefully it's a bit of a, like Fergie used to do that, didn't he? He was good at that, you know, get the players to pull out. And I think clubs should do that, you know, lean on the players a little bit to go, come on. You know, you don't want to push yourself and get yourself injured for a big run-in. So hopefully you're right. Hopefully it's a rest and he's fit and firing, because even the drop-off for Gravenberch, one of the great things about drop, the interesting things about it is I don't think it's been such a drop-off that you're now doubting him in that position, is it? You know, he's established.
He was.
Exactly. So, you know, you're happy enough with his form for him to stay there. So hopefully it's just a rest.
And the blessing from it as well is when you look at what the Dutch did, 120 minutes, a 5-full aggregate draw. I'm not really thrilled that Van Dijk had to play the full 90 and then the full 120, but he scored in the shootout for the Dutch. So why didn't he take one against PSG? He took the first one.
He took one of the best penalties I've ever seen the other year when was it
Kepa
tried to like get him come in this corner and he just went
and then just stared him down. Talking of international withdrawals, I think my favourite one ever was March 2019, Liverpool City going for the run. I think Robertson withdrew from Scotland duty. Can anyone remember why?
No.
Toothache.
Great,
that isn't it? That's like straight from the playbook, isn't it? You were both at Anfield this weekend. Obviously, no Premier League action, but something a little different. The Liverpool Legends game. Was it I think it was the 9th Legends game, wasn't it, Theo?
Something like that.
They've raised over
our Legends expert
correspondent. 7.5 million. That was raised before the weekend over those 8
Don't ask
games.
me how much they've raised on this one because it's not been announced yet.
I'm just going to get your take, kind of both of you, on that weekend. As Joe says, Theo, you go to a lot of the Legends games. It's obviously a different crowd to what you'd normally get at a Premier League game, but it's just a really good day. It always seems like quite wholesome. Obviously, Steven Gerrard was back. You see that moment Peter Crouch scores twice at the Cop End. I mean, do you want to just talk us through kind of how that day went and what it was like?
Yeah, it's a really nice day, and I think they've become more important the better Liverpool have got, because it's harder for your everyday fan to get tickets. Like, this could be the first time that some of these fans have gone to Anfield ever, first time this season, and that's a shame, because you think 10 years ago it was so much easier, even if it was Europa League or League Cup, you could see Liverpool play, whereas now you're watching from afar, and it's a much younger crowd. They don't remember Gerrard playing, they don't remember Crouch playing, but it's still a chance for them to witness this. Like, Joe takes his lads there, first time they've, not this one, but it's the first time they've been in the past, isn't it? So it is just an all-round great day, and it's so infectious seeing how it means to some of them. Like Peter Crouch celebrating like he scored in the World Cup final, that big beaming smile, does the robots for the kids. It's so feel-good. You can't not leave with a smile on your face yourself. I was a bit underwhelmed by the squad before this one because there was no Alonso, there's no Torres, but then you leave Anfield on Saturday going, that was another really great day. You speak to a few of the players in the mix zone and they're just delighted to be back. They're part of something special. Like, we spoke to Ragnar Klavan, Yossi Benayoun, Sander Westerveld as well. It was really insightful stuff about the goalkeeping situation. But you can see that the passion they've got for Liverpool Football Club. And it's nice when you have that break in the season, when they're going for a Premier League title, that all these former Liverpool players, they're still part of the family. They're still cheering them on. It's really nice.
I think it's really good to see how much it means to those players, even if they've only played a few years, 2 years. You look at Klavan, for instance, wasn't here a great deal. Yes, he was a bit of a cult hero, but kind of how much they hang on to that of having played for Liverpool for 1 or 2 seasons, it means the world to them, doesn't it, Theo?
Yeah, it does. Like, Klavan, it's put him on even more on the map, isn't it? Like, how many of us had actually heard of him before he joined Liverpool, despite the fact that they played at Augsburg in the Europa League?
Yeah.
Like, he was Estonia's most famous export, and no one really outside of Estonia had heard of him much. But then it's given him that whole new stratosphere, and it's just nice to see some of the other ones play. Like Jay Spearing treated it like he would have done playing in the Football League, having his little scrap with Dennis Wise. Another nice little story was Martin Kelly. He played through the full 90 minutes. I think that would have been his first appearance since he did his ACL on loan at West Brom. So I'm not sure if he's like officially retired or anything, but he was probably, for me, one of the best players on that pitch. And both him and Spearing...
I'm going to say one of the best players you've ever seen for Liverpool. There.
But then him and Spearing, they did the march of the day, the Stephen Darby motor neuron thing. They did that the next day. So for them to play 90 minutes, 80 minutes, whatever, and then do that, where they had to walk from, I think, Wembley to Portman Road. Jeez. They didn't do the full walk, they just did the second day. But like, they've put their miles in, haven't they? This is international break. Fair play to the two of them.
And Joe, you was it both of your lads that you saw?
Yeah.
And was that the first time they'd both been to Anfield together?
No, they went for the women's game against Man City last year. But yeah, I take the boys. I've been taking my eldest boy for the past 3 years. I have to say, if anyone's listening, they've got kids and they for whatever reason they can't get to Anfield that much, or they haven't taken their kids yet. Mine is 6 and 3. Probably 3 is a bit young, but we didn't want him to miss out. But certainly for 5, 6, 7, I think it's a great first experience. All round, it's a brilliant day. First of all, the tickets are affordable. It's obviously for a great cause. You can go and use. When I go to match, I'm not one for using the facilities much at Anfield. I go in, get there, watch the match. I don't really like to miss any of the match. So, if I run downstairs at half time, it's just to go to the toilet and come back up. So, when you go to something like this, you can get there early, you can get food, you can get a drink, you can take the kids down. You're not bothered if you miss a couple of minutes of the game, and they can move around. And yeah, the other thing I would say is, like, it's not as intense. I remember going to the matches when I was a kid, and you were kind of surprised at maybe some of the language or some of the sort of passion, which you get used to as you get older. But for a 6 or 7 year old, it can be quite intimidating. So I think for them, it's fun, it's nice. People are singing, they're laughing, they're happy. They're not bothered who wins or loses, and it's a celebration. So I honestly would say to anyone that wants to take their kids to a match, but maybe doesn't know when the right time is,
where to start. Kind of.
It's really good. I try to. I've got better at it as well. As soon as it's announced, I always try and get my tickets early because you can choose from better seats, but it's always affordable. And yeah, it's a really, really great day. And like Theo said, I think it's great for some of the players involved because, yeah, like Peter Crouch. I loved Crouch as a player. I thought he was a great player for Liverpool. He was one of the most earnest players that Liverpool have ever had. When he scored his first goals against Wigan, I don't know how old did you have been then? That was 2005.
Late 2005,
yeah. But I always remember that being one of the happiest occasions. You know, like
Was
to be
it
winning
an
3-0.
11-game drought or something?
Yeah,
It's longer than that.
But he tried really hard. You know, like he played really well.
He'd missed penalties.
He missed penalties. He was a really likable player. You could tell his teammates really liked him and valued him. The manager really liked him and valued him, and the fans really got behind him. So when he scored that day, it was just a brilliant day all round. And he was just, he always had that likable character, Crouch, and obviously that's gone into his punditry and his work after football. But to see him back, to see him score two great goals, and to see how much it meant to him, it's just great. You know, like Theo was saying, lots of these players, Martin Kelly, you know, you might not say he's a Liverpool legend, but the club meant a lot to him, and it's good that he can come back and be celebrated. Clavan, I'm sure people like Endo's the perfect player who'll come back and play in the Legends team, and we can celebrate Endo's, you know, smaller Liverpool career than many others, but no less important. So it's a great day for a great cause. The only issue I have is that I think there should be more. I think it could be a couple of them.
What they do at the minute, is it 1 or 2 a year?
One a year.
One a year. We had 2 or 3 a couple of years ago, but that was the backlog after the pandemic, where they had to get them in because obviously had them arranged. Crouch is one of my big, 2 Liverpool regrets in terms of he should have started the 2007 Champions League final. Yeah. And if they'd kept him for 2008-09 rather than signing Robbie Keane, I reckon they win the league. Because Torres was injured a bit, he scores a few goals. But he was just...
Couldn't agree more.
He was a really good Liverpool player, but he wasn't someone you'd put on that pedestal of Fernando Torres. So to see him get the second loudest reception after Steven Gerrard at the weekend was a little bit surreal, and I think he found that a little bit surreal as well. But it makes you realise how well liked he is by absolutely everyone, and the lengths he's gone to, his media career, doing his podcasts and everything. It's just this really good figure in football, isn't he? And he loved being there. The young kids loved seeing them there. The fact that he did the robot because of them, it's just a real nice feel good to it. So yeah, I agree. It'd be nice to have a couple of them a season. It's a bit harder to fit them in when you've just got the international breaks. But you'd much rather watch a few old men kick a football around having a good time than England with a boring 2-0 win over Latvia or whatever.
Preach, Theo, preach.
And I like
You've changed.
I like how serious they quietly take it in terms of the last few years after they lost to Barcelona, the first one after the pandemic. Oh, we can't run as much now. We'll go 5 at the back, third centre back, take that strain out. We'll keep all the pace on the bench for the second half against tired defences.
Poor Cisse just got dragged off, didn't he?
And then as soon as Crouch came on, it's great. They're not going to be able to jump as high now. Yeah. These men are in their 40s and 50s. Let's just lump it on his head.
Was that a great header? Yeah, it was a great header.
So they just take every small little advantage, and it's quite nice to see them still have that competitive edge to it.
Look at what it means to their families as well. You know, like I don't know whether you've seen Abby Clancy's put on Instagram like that she was just delighted to be back. That she put something like, I never thought we'd see Peter play or score for Liverpool ever again. So obviously that's something that they as a couple have discussed. You know, it obviously meant a lot to him, and I think that was great. I know that you know, Mark Gonzalez is a player who... Mark Gonzalez, by the way, just a quick tangent. I always remember he's one of the most excited... One of the signings I've been most excited about when I was young. You'd read stuff about him. I remember reading like 442 and World Soccer, and he was really bigged up, and he joined Liverpool after a year's wait, and then didn't really do a lot. He scored in his debut against Maccabi Haifa, and
the winner, wasn't it, last minute?
Yeah, and I thought he was going to be really good. Never quite made it, but it's great to see him back. He plays for Legends game.
He's great in the Legends games.
He's obviously still got a bit of pace. But I saw his wife post on Instagram as well, like how made up they are every year to come back. So it's good. It's just a really good atmosphere. It's a really good occasion, and obviously it all goes into a great cause. So football should do more of it. You know, every club should be trying to do it, and Liverpool could do a couple of them a year. It'd be great to see it happen. So fair play to all involved.
And what's good about it as well is in a couple of years we'll have the rest of the club legends joining in.
Yeah,
people say, "Oh, how is so and so a Liverpool legend?" But the next guard it is your James Milners, your Adam Lallana's. Then after that,
maybe not James Milner yet. James Milner probably
Jordan Henderson,
5-10 years.
Endo.
When he's 58. Yeah.
But then you could see Firmino come back, or Gini Wijnaldum, Sadio Mane. Like, granted, they're not all going to come back every single year, but to get that nice extra touch. I wrote in one of my pieces, it's a shame that we couldn't see Matip and Thiago for this one. Fair enough, they retired from injury. They might not be able to do it. They might have other commitments, but it would be nice having seen them miss most of last
season. Especially with someone like Matip, the way his Liverpool career ended, he got that injury that, you know...
You want them to come back so you can give them a bit more.
Perfect send-off, isn't it?
It's redemption for some of them as well. You know, Sander Westerveld left Liverpool under a cloud and comes back every year and plays. and gets a nice ovation. You know, there are several other players like that. You know, Mark Gonzalez is probably one that regrets the way his Liverpool career went in terms of him not being able to make the breakthrough. You know, there are people like, I'm not saying he ever would, but let's say Loris Karius. He could come back, he could play in a nice atmosphere, he'd get a nice ovation, and it might be a nice way for him to reconnect with the club that perhaps doesn't give him that many happy memories. And that's why another reason why I think it's really good to see players that perhaps didn't quite do it. You know, again, people sneered and they go, "Oh, such and such isn't a Liverpool legend," but
there's more than you don't have to win the Premier League 5 times.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and also to just have that connection with the club, it can mean a lot to you. With it, you might have played one game, you might have played 1,000. You know, it doesn't really make a difference if it means a lot to you. It means a lot to you.
And Theo, Steven Gerrard still got it.
Yeah, still does. It's not as elite as he was in those first. Not as elite as he was in those first couple of Legends games. He can't go box to box anymore, but his passing's still exceptional, and it's still everything goes through him. I'm not sure if you were aware on it. You know that moment he did the dummy in the first half.
Oh, it was a great dummy.
And then he was fuming at Ryan Babel. Yeah. So he's still got it up here in his head, definitely. And he's just a shame he can't give us a 25-yard pile driver anymore. He was urged to a few times. I think the only time he came close would have been high and wide in the first half, and then Aurelio nicked a free kick off him in front of the Kop.
Yeah. I thought Gerrard was
that on the both ran for it?
Yeah,
I did see that.
Yeah.
But that's all for us on today's episode of the Blood Red Podcast. We'll be back on Friday,
presumably.
Hopefully,
back on Friday. So stay tuned for more Liverpool news and reaction. Thank you for listening.